Welcome, everyone, to the Change Starts Here podcast. I'm your host, Dustin Odham, and today's guest is a man that has inspired me for a number of years now. He's a New York Times bestselling author, a book called The Speed of Trust. Stephen Covey is passionate about the power of trust, and in today's conversation, I think I do a decent job of pushing back and asking some tougher questions, more practical questions, but he's going to dive into the power of creating a high trust culture and being a high trust leader. He's going to talk about why it's important. We're going to talk about one thing I love what he says about the power of creating a renaissance of trust. That's what we need to try to do right now, is create a renaissance of trust. And we'll dive into what that means. And then he'll leave us with one thing that we've all got to get better at, is extending trust, and why that's important and how we do it. This conversation, for those of you who have not been around Stephen before, his passion will just get you up out of your seat, ready to go charge and take on the world. And you'll feel it here from the first question on. And so if you're someone who is thinking about, how do I get better as we're going into next year, or ready to start and build the culture I've always dreamed of and be the leader I've always wanted to be, this is an amazing conversation. And so thanks for making time for it. Enjoy Stephen and Mark Covey. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, so great to be with you, Dustin. Excited to be here.
Yeah. So I want to ask, the first question that we ask every guest is, who are you and why do you love what you do?
First of all, I love that question. I am a husband to an amazing woman, Jerry, my wife of 36 years. I am a father of 5 children. I love each of them dearly, a grandfather of 6 grandchildren. And I am also an advocate and a champion for trust and for building high trust relationships, high trust teams, high trust cultures as a way of elevating all of society. And I think we need more trust in the world. And so why do I love what I do? I love it because I feel like we're operating increasingly in a world of declining trust, where the trust tends to be going down all around us. And in the danger of a low trust world is that it tends to perpetuate itself. We all become a little bit more careful, more cautious, more guarded in a world of declining trust, because none of us want to get burned. But then people respond back to us a little bit more careful, cautious, and guarded. And we could find ourselves, perhaps unwittingly, beginning to create a vicious cycle of distrust and suspicion, creating more distrust and suspicion, and everybody feeling justified in the process. You see, distrust is contagious. But here's the good news. Trust also is contagious. And trust and confidence can create more trust and confidence, where people feel enlightened by it. They feel inspired by it. They feel validated. They rise to the occasion. They want to prove the trust justified, and they perform better, and they give it back to you. And so I believe we need to counteract the world of distrust by creating possibilities and outcomes of high trust, and being a model of trust and a mentor of trust, so that we can counteract the distrust all around us. That inspires me. That makes me want to get up every day and be a catalyst to help create more trust in our world, and to help other leaders create more trust in their worlds, and to do it within education, to do it within business, to do it within government, healthcare, and really every industry, and ultimately in all society. And I believe that we really can build and bring about a renaissance of trust. And so that's why I love what I do, because I feel like I'm part of being a catalyst with many others to help bring about a renaissance of trust.
So I think when I hear that, I'm going to push back, just because it's really inspiring. It feels like it oozes out of you. Has anyone ever said, Stephen, that's great, but I've got a list of other priorities that I have to work on with my organization or my school or my district.
Right.
How do you respond when you hear that?
Yeah. First of all, I have great empathy for it because administrators, leaders within schools and within districts are overwhelmed. And there are so many initiatives, so many priorities, so many pressure, so many demands, so many stakeholders on educators and on leaders within education. So I feel great empathy and understanding for those demands and pressures. And I try to position trust for what it really is, which is not so much another thing to do, because you already have too many things to do.
Right.
Rather, this is how you do what you do. If you do things in a way that builds trust, that inspires trust naturally through your credibility, through your behavior, then the trust will go up as you do what you already are doing. And as the trust goes up, you'll get a multiplier effect on all your other efforts, all your other initiatives. You can do them better. You can do them faster. You can do them with less cost, with greater energy, more joy. And so high trust is a performance multiplier, and it's an accelerator, and it's an energizer for everything else that you've got to do already. And so I don't see trust as another thing to do. This is how we do what we do. And when we do it in a way that builds trust through our behavior, then we get this multiplier effect on everything else that we're trying to do. I mean, who wouldn't want to have all our other efforts be multiplied with a force multiplier of high trust? And this is the data from Tony Breik of Stanford, did a 400 school study. You know, these are K through 12 schools, and over multiple years, 400 school study that shows that high trust schools outperform low trust schools in every imaginable measure, not by a little amount, but by a huge amount. For instance, the ability to improve test scores and move the needle on learning goes up by about 3.5 times in a high trust school versus a low trust school. The ability to engage your different stakeholders, whether that be parents or the community at large or teachers, goes up dramatically in a high trust school than a low trust school. The ability to, make your budget stretch farther and go do more with less goes up in a high trust school more than a low trust school, not by a little amount, but by a huge amount. And so all the initiatives that we have of really engaging our stakeholders, engaging our parents, engaging the communities, inspiring our teachers, helping our students learn and perform and do better goes up with trust. To attract and retain great teachers, to inspire them, goes up with trust. And so everything else we're trying to do, we can just do so much better when we start with trust. So this is a multiplier, an accelerator, and an energizer to every other initiative. I call trust the one thing that changes everything. So I understand the pressures. I've seen them. I've worked with so many leaders that are grappling with them. They are real and intense. And I'm offering a secret sauce that will help you do everything else that you're doing better, and also with more energy and joy. Not only, more efficiency, more energy, more joy, more creativity, more inspiration, more passion that flows from high trust. And we need that today. We're all burned out. We need trust and the energy and the joy that it brings at a time when we feel so beat up and so burnt out with all that we've been through over these last, 15 plus months.
So I've had the privilege of spending almost every one of my professional years in education, working all the way up to districts where we got to work with some of the highest struggling schools that we had in the state I was working in. And I've yet to meet an educator who would consider themselves not trustworthy and would evaluate the culture that they're building as untrustworthy. As a leader myself, if I was in a school or a district, or if I'm a leader of a school and I want to help one of my principals recognize what's happening, how do you help, or what are some ways that we can uncover if I'm living out a high trust environment, if I'm creating that? How do we assess that is really the question I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, it's a great question, because we all kind of try to be trustworthy, and most of us see us as trustworthy. And I think for the most part, we are. We're not perfect, but most leaders genuinely strive to be trustworthy. And I think that's great. And we should continue to strive to do that by focusing on our credibility and also on our behavior. And so I think our intent is good. And I think generally, for the most part, we do strive to be trustworthy. But if I'm going to kind of break it down into two pieces: credibility and behavior. So if we focus on our credibility, and that's our character and our competence. And, and I think that oftentimes when we think of trustworthy, we think of character, and that's the starting point, but we also need to add to it competence. And that includes our capabilities and our results. That will help inspire more trust. And part of our capabilities include the ability to create trust, to establish trust intentionally, on purpose, as a leader. And so I find that we do a pretty good job here. It's just that the world is changing so fast around us. We've got to keep changing with it and stay ahead of the curve. So the need to constantly be focusing on our capabilities, our talents, our expertise, our skills, our knowledge is never been greater than it is today, because there's just too much information, too much knowledge. None of us can be a know-it-all anymore. We need to become a learn-it-all. We need to be able to learn better and help our students learn better, help our teachers learn better, and our other leaders, and we ourselves need to model it. So we just trying our best to model through our credibility, to model through our behavior. And where the opportunity really is big is around the behavior side. And again, that's how we do what we do. So do we talk straight? Our intent is not to lie. That's the opposite. But too often we fall into counterfeits where we spin or twist or manipulate a posture. But the candid, open, authentic, real, straight talk builds trust. Do we create transparency versus having, the hidden agendas? Do we practice accountability, take responsibility versus a little bit of the finger pointing, the blame game? Do we listen first, where we really understand people, or do we just kind of listen with the intent to reply? And do we keep commitments and do what we say we're going to do, or do we somewhat overpromise and then underdeliver? These are some of the behaviors that help us build trust. I think the opportunity tends to be really great around the behavior side, where, again, we have good intent, we want to be trustworthy, but oftentimes we can get trapped in counterfeit behavior that could get in the way of building trust. So the more open we can be, the more authentic we can be, the more real around our behavior, and behave in the ways that will build trust. Some of the things I've talked about: talking straight with demonstrating respect, listening first with keeping commitments and such. And there's one behavior I want to spend a little bit of time on in a few minutes, and that will be extend trust. We'll come back to that. But these are the types of things that I think can really help us move the needle on trust and create more trust through not only our credibility, which we might call trustworthiness, but also through our behavior. We have to behave our way into trust, just like you could behave your way out of trust.
Absolutely. That resonates a lot with me. I think as I'm trying to put my head around some of the schools that we've been able to serve and help improve, I think some of the pushback would be, well, I'm trying to have straight talk, but if I talk straight, I'll crush that teacher or that principal. It'll paralyze them.
Right.
As the pushback that we've gotten. How do you? What's your advice for helping us get over that hump?
Yeah. Okay. Here's two things. The first is, in my work on the speed of trust, I give what I call 13 behaviors common to high trust leaders. And these behaviors, they work together. They're balanced by each other. So they help us kind of balance these out and not go too far with anyone. So for example, on your very point, talk straight is balanced by demonstrate respect. And you're right. If you're too much of a straight talker, you might find that backfiring where you go too far. And rather than being helpful, it could be hurtful. You could be offensive. You could offend everyone. You might say, hey, in the name of talking straight, I'm going to just tell it like it is. And you say, you're a lousy teacher, or you're this or that. And, that's not going to be helpful. That's going to be hurtful and harmful. And so any strength pushed to the extreme or too far could become a weakness. So you're trying to find the sweet spot. And these behaviors work together. Don't just run with talk straight. Be a straight talker, but balance it with demonstrate respect. So you're balancing courage with consideration. You're trying to find the sweet spot to be effective and to be and such. But here's another key thing. So, so the first thing is use good judgment. Find the sweet spot. Balance this out. Work, see these behaviors as a piano keyboard. You don't want to just play one note of straight talk. You want to balance it with all of them. Demonstrate respect, listen first, and so forth. But here's a second key piece. Always start with intent. What's your intent? And are you trying to help or trying to hurt? And if your intent is where your motive is one of caring, and your agenda is one of seeking mutual benefit, win, and I want to help. And then if you will up front, when you're having these conversations, if you declare your intent, and so you not only share kind of what you're doing, but why, you say, hey, here's my agenda. Here's my intent here. I just want to help. And so I'm going to talk to you openly, honestly, because my intent is to help. I'm not trying to hurt. And so everything I'm doing here is all with the idea of being helpful in this process. And I want to work on me too. You're always saying, just like the name of this podcast, change starts here. Trust starts here. It starts with me. So if I want to build trust with somebody else, I'm always looking at myself, how I can focus on me, including my intent. What's my motive? Do I care? What's my agenda? Am I trying to help or trying to hurt? If you're trying to hurt, then don't talk straight. That's not going to be useful. If you're trying to help, then maybe some straight talk balanced with respect could be useful to people. If you declare your intent up front to the person, they might see you differently as you talk about some of the things, the challenges, the opportunities in front of you as you're talking more openly. But if they are questioning your intent, or if you don't declare your intent, they don't see you as an advocate of them, then they might not want to hear the straight talk, and the straight talk could backfire. So this is judgment. It's not a one size fits all, but a great best practice for any leader: always declare your intent. Give the why behind the what. And not only declare your intent, declare yourself. So you might say, as a leader, you say, here's who I am. Just like your first question, who are you? And what do you love about what you do? Here's who I am as a leader. Here's how I like to work with people. And here's, I declare myself. And the whole idea is I'm taking the mystery out of the relationship. I learned this from Doug Conant. He's the former CEO of the Campbell Soup Company. And he took him from among the worst in the world in engagement to world-class engagement during his stewardship, his tenure. And he said that he began every meeting he had where he would come in with anyone he was working with. And in their very first meeting, he would declare his intent and declare himself. And his whole goal was to take the mystery out of the relationship. So here's who I am and how I like to work with people. And so I'm saying, if you go in as a leader and say, here's who I am, here's how I like to work with people, and it's always around mutual benefit and building trust, getting great results, serving students, inspiring students, engaging, empowering teachers, trusting teachers, helping you succeed. And if you declare your intent, declare yourself, people will view and interpret your behavior through a different lens. When you don't declare your intent, people ascribe intent to you anyways from their own perspective, And in a beat up world, they'll project fears or worst case scenarios. And at best, they'll be guessing. So our rule is no guessing. Declare your intent, declare yourself. Those are great best practices. And also assume positive intent. It's the other part of this. Assume positive intent with everyone you're working with, especially during hard times. And that's an act of trusting people to assume positive intent. This will help you build trust better, faster with people.
I love that. And I think first off, declaring intent is great. And I think through one of the challenges that I think every leader faces in any organization, no matter if your school's high functioning or not, is creating that culture where we assume the best intent, right? That's the thing. Like, how does a leader of a district or a leader of a school yes. So one-on-one, I can visualize this, but with the school, how do I create that ongoing culture where we're just assuming the best in each other, even when we let each other down? Because that tax right there hurts and slows down so much productivity.
It really does, Dustin. You're exactly right. And it's always harder to create a culture because that's, culture is what most of the people do and think and say most of the time. Yep. And, it's what the fly on the wall sees. It's not just the mission statement and the values. It's what actually happens, and the behaviors. And it's very easy to say, let's assume positive intent, but the culture could be one of where people might say that, but not do it and such. And so building the kind of culture is really the highest leverage thing you can do as a leader, is to build a culture. And the best way to build a culture is, again, consistent with the mindset of this podcast. Change starts here. A high trust culture starts here. It starts with me. So I model it. And I model as declaring my intent and assuming positive intent. And I help others see the importance of this. But in their interactions with me, they see me modeling it. And maybe I help others do it too. So someone might start to kind of, let's say we're in a meeting and someone starts to dogpile on another administrator that's not doing well, but we don't know all the facts. So maybe my modeling is to say, hey, these are important points we're bringing up, but I'll bet there's other things that are happening here we're not aware of. And, and I'm demonstrating, I'm assuming positive intent. And so why don't we try to, before we go down this path, let's go to the person and let's try to understand, because I bet there's another side to this, another perspective we don't fully understand. I'm assuming positive intent. I'm using the words and I'm modeling the actions of what to do. I try to do it myself. I try to help others do it. And when someone starts to do this, I maybe will call them out in a nice way of saying, let's not go down that path. Let's learn more. Let's assume positive intent. If we get enough of us doing this, and enough could just be a critical mass. It doesn't have to be everyone, not even necessarily the majority, but enough leaders doing this, modeling this, then we can begin to ripple out from there. That's how you build a culture, is you try to build that critical mass of leaders. And depending on your role, you can be the model of it. If you're the principal of a school, start with your school and how you model with your direct reports and with your teachers, and how that gets rippled throughout. And then you try to model it with other fellow peer principals. And then you try to model it up perhaps to the district. And maybe you don't feel that support coming down from the district, but you try to be the catalyst, the model of how they could operate this way. So change starts here. Trust starts here. A high trust culture starts with each of us. We are a model, then we become a mentor. And that's how we do it. It's that simple and that hard. And it's very hard.
So as you were saying that, I think, I visualize a lot of our folks out there. Again, I'm not assuming negative abilities or intent of their leaders, but I have to believe there's so many listeners that are thinking, yeah, I model it every day, but it's not improving. What advice do you have for them to keep that fire lit so they're not discouraged if they're modeling for their superiors, and it's not changing soon enough for their eyes.
Yeah. Very real. And so I recognize that often will happen. Two things. First is continue to move forward with this, stay persistent, and even maybe challenge yourself of I think I'm modeling, but maybe I could even get better at this. Because what we find all the time, Dustin, is we kind of do surveys, and like we'll do a team trust index for a district where we're measuring the level of trust within a team, within a district, and everyone participates. So all the district leaders are there, and all the principals are, kind of measuring how well I live. I model the behaviors. And here's what we always find. When everyone measures themselves, they rate themselves pretty high. And then when they rate their fellow team members, there's usually a 20, 30, sometimes 40, 50 point gap in how they measure everybody else. And so it's kind of like, I'm okay, but you, fellow principal, you've got problems. Or I'm okay, but you, district leader, you've got problems. And the problem is the district leader's doing the same thing about their teachers, about their principals. They're saying, I'm modeling this behavior, but you, principal, you've got problems. Because the gaps, when everyone measures themselves, we roll it up and you get scores in the 80s and 90s of living the values and of modeling the behavior. And then we ask them to rate everybody else who just rated themselves in the 80s and 90s, and we get the scores in the 40s and the 50s. The same people who rated themselves in the 80s and 90s. So maybe we think we're doing a little bit better than we really are, or we could all get better at this. So just stay persistent with the modeling and really say, okay, maybe I think I'm doing this, but could I continue to do this and can I do it better? Second, start to measure your wins kind of one relationship at a time, one person at a time. And maybe you might say, hey, I wish there was more change happening. And I wish the leader above me would change, but I'm having success. I just built a great relationship with this principal, or I just built a great relationship with this peer or with this person. And we built more trust here or on our team. And you just literally start to recognize and celebrate the small wins, just like each child you're impacting in your schools. That alone is a huge triumph. Same with each relationship, where you're building more trust in that relationship, or on each team, you're building more trust. That also is a huge triumph. And you start to celebrate and recognize each of those wins, one relationship at a time, one person at a time, versus trying to boil the ocean and change the entire culture. What if I could change it just on my team? See that as a huge win and triumph. And then maybe your team interacts with other teams and you become a model of excellence and of high trust, perhaps in a sea of distrust, and that though can ripple out from there. So I would just ratchet it down, one relationship at a time.
I feel like a theme that's coming out through our conversation is, again, it starts with me. So at first it's a mirror, right? Then it's, let me find the few folks that I really work closely with and start just working on high trust there, and then continue to broaden that out, right? But first and foremost, I've got to own that mirror every day and own that with the small team that I have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is simple, but just not easy. And we'd all like to have the quick fix. But those fixes tend to be outside in. We try to change structure or systems or reorganize, move things around. The only way to bring about this kind of change is inside out. It's got to be by working on ourselves and then working on relationships. But I also will say this, that we can become more bold. See, the more credible we are, the more we work on ourselves, the more bold we can be with others, including with our boss. What would give you courage to kind of be bold with your boss? Your credibility. The more credible you are, the more courage you have, the more clout you have, the more permission you have to have a courageous conversation, a bold conversation with your boss. And here's what I've also learned. As you're working with people, always make sure that we separate the person from their behavior. So don't attack people, instead address behavior. So if you're working with someone where there's not very much trust and you'd like them to change, rather than saying, hey, what's wrong with you? I don't trust you. In fact, nobody on our team trusts you. That's not going to be very effective. Those are fighting words. A far more effective way to maybe help bring about the change is to separate the person from their behavior. And rather than saying, I don't trust you, say, hey, this kind of behavior. When you say you're going to do something and then don't do it, make a commitment and don't keep it. Or when you kind of spin what you're communicating, or when you go behind people's backs instead of going straight to the person, it causes me and others to lose trust. And then you make a behavior-specific request. So here's what I would ask of you. Don't make a commitment unless you're going to keep it. I'd rather you not make the commitment than to make one and not intend to fully keep it. When you talk with me, just tell me the truth. Just talk straight to me. I give you permission, even if you think I don't want to hear it. Just talk straight to me. Be open with me. Be transparent. If you got a concern or issue, come straight to me. I invite you. Make it easy and safe to do that. I'm just telling you, I want you to just come straight to me. You're making behavior-specific requests of them. And what gives you the courage to do that? Your credibility. And then now, let them behave their way back into trust, just like you are trying to do the same with them, and always reciprocate. And what can I do to build more trust with you? And so it's always a process of trying to behave our way into greater trust. We model it and we ask it of others too. So the boldness is that you might courageously say to someone where you'd like to see them do more, say, maybe you confront their behavior and you make a behavior specific request of them of what you would like to see to help build more trust with you, even with your boss. And the only way you would dare do that with your boss is if you have focused on your own credibility and your character, your competence, such that that building that relationship with the boss is important. And this is what would help build that relationship to build more trust. So you make that behavior specific request. And that's how you'll move the needle. That's being bold and courageous, and maybe break some of these logger jams that get in the way and slow down the building of trust.
So a second ago, you said something that hit me right in the heart. And I think, one, because I've struggled with this; two, because I've seen this in lots of educators, well-intentioned, positive, passionate people who are serving lots of folks, whether it's a principal, lots of teachers, district with lots of staff throughout the district that they oversee. You could have those days where you've got 20 different meetings that you're going to, and with the most well-intended meaning of saying, Stephen, I'm going to follow up on this for you. I've got it done. I go to the next meeting. I'll do that. I'll do this. And at the end, they don't do any of it, right? Because again, it's not meaning. What's your advice for those folks who have, again, they're not even trying to smooth it or say I've got it all together. They just apparently don't have a system or created a system of honoring it. What's the advice you give those folks to break that cycle?
Yeah, I would say to recognize the importance of getting a brand, a reputation that you will always do what you say you're going to do. And you'd be better off disappointing people up front and say, you know what, I'm not in a position to be able to do this right now. I can't take this on right now because I have too much. I wish I could. Well, we got to work on figuring out how we're going to get to it. Then to say, okay, we'll take that on, we'll handle it, and then not deliver on that. If you say you're going to do it and then don't do it, or give a counterfeit version of it where you have overpromised and underdelivered, you'll lose people's trust and confidence. You'd be better off just saying, I'm not in a position to deliver on that right now. I'd like to get to that, but I'm not there yet, than to say, I will do that and then not do it. You'd be far better off to disappoint them up front, because then at least they might be disappointed with you, but they might say, well, at least they told me the truth. Right. I can trust what they say. If you say you're going to do it and then don't do it, they say, not only did they not deliver, I can't trust when he tells me in the future. It's like someone said, Nietzsche, the German philosopher, or Nietzsche said, someone betrayed his trust and didn't do what he said he was going to do. And he said, it's not so much that you lied to me, it's that I can no longer believe you. Well, see, it's going forward. It's what it does. And if someone says they're going to do this and don't do it, then I can no longer fully believe them. And that's what's painful. So again, I have great empathy, understanding for the overwhelming nature of the challenges that district leaders and school leaders are in with what's going on right now, with all the pressures, all the demands from multiple stakeholders, sometimes competing interests and demands from the stakeholders, where one stakeholder wants one thing and another just the opposite. And as we've been through this pandemic, that's often the case of what the parents want, what the teachers want, and we all want a common thing of, to educate our students well, but there's so many demands, sometimes competing demands. And so we're doing the best we can to balance this, but we got to confront reality and not overpromise and underdeliver. But I also would say this, then we also try to increase our capacities and our systems and our structures and leverage ourselves more, because if it's all on one administrator, one leader, none of us can do everything. So we've got to build that culture. It's back to this idea of, if you build a high trust culture, an empowered culture, then it's not just you, it's the whole culture. You have more capacity because there's more capabilities. Because while you yourself might be overwhelmed, you could maybe tap into the capabilities and talents of others who have more to give, more to offer, and that we're not tapping into fully. And suddenly we leverage ourselves, we multiply ourselves, and that's what's needed. That's why building a high trust culture is the single highest leverage thing you can do as a leader within a district or within a school, because the culture then will enable everything else to come out, and it multiplies and magnifies and expands you, the leader. It is an extension of your leadership. It's a magnification of your leadership. It's a performance multiplier of your leadership. And you can do more this way, but it's going to require you to trust, not only to be trustworthy, to also be trusting. And so this is maybe, I'll come back to this trusting idea. I want to make sure we end with that.
Okay.
This is going to be my charge. That's going to be my ending charge when you're ready to end. You tell me, but we'll continue the conversation. But this idea of being not just trustworthy, but trusting. This is going to be my number one takeaway.
Well, I don't want to end the conversation, but I could talk to you all day. I think it feels like this point from the first time we started talking to now has just been ready to come out of your heart. So I want to hear it. So my question normally is, what's your advice for right now of one step our leaders can take to create change in their lives?
This is my advice, and I feel so passionate about this for all leaders in any walk of life. But let me say this to educators and to district leaders, whether you're a superintendent, head of curriculum, head of whatever within the district, a resource leader, or a school leader, as a principal, assistant principal, whatever your role, especially to leaders, that we not only need to be trustworthy, which I think we're all working on, the greatest opportunity to unleash capabilities, potential, talent, greatness, not just of our students, but of our entire district, our entire school, is for us as leaders to be trusting. Not just trustworthy, but trusting. And we can be far more trusting than we think. I want to challenge all of us. We might think we're trusting. In fact, the data shows most people think they're trusting. And there's usually a 300% gap between how much trust I think I'm giving and how others feel like I'm giving. We're not near as trusting as we think we are. Others don't experience it that way. And it's very possible that someone is too trusting and they trust anyone and everyone regardless, and they're getting burned left and right. There's that possibility. I call that a blind trust, where you don't use good judgment or you don't have expectations or accountability. Occasionally that can happen. So I'm not advocating for a blind trust. I'm advocating for a smart trust, where you use good judgment and you assess the situation, you assess the risk involved of extending trust to someone, You assess the credibility of the person. How ready are they for it? And then you use good judgment in extending trust to them. So that's called smart trust versus indiscriminate blind trust of just one size fits all.
Right.
So have smart trust, not blind trust. What I want to challenge us on is we can be far more trusting than we think we can. And we can extend it more abundantly, more frequently to more people. If you do it in a smart way where you always have clear expectations and an agreed upon process for accountability, people will respond to being trusted. They'll rise to the occasion. They will perform better. Your principals will, your teachers will, and they will give it back to you. And you'll generate a reciprocity of trust. You'll unleash them. They have more capabilities and more talents. Just this week, I was on a webinar that I did for a big business with several thousand people all around the world operating. And the CEO said, the best thing about trusting other people is that you will see all kinds of new ways of doing things and accomplishing things that they come up with. Their ingenuity is limitless. And whereas where you prescribe and dictate methods, when you trust people, when you kind of say, hey, here's what to do and how to do it, as opposed to saying, here's what we're trying to do. You come up with how to do it as long as we follow these guidelines or within these, within this moral or ethical constraints. They come up with all kinds of possibilities that you might not have ever thought of. They are creative, they're innovative, and they're more capable and they're more committed to it. And we have seen that time and time again. The greatest opportunity today is to be more trusting as leaders and to really challenge ourselves on this. And because of what that does and how it unleashes potential. I love what we're doing at FranklinCovey with the Leader in Me process, because think about it. It is being trusting of our students and of our teachers that there is a leader inside of every student. And our job is to help bring it out. And that is an extraordinary extension of trust in the student, and an extraordinary extension of trust in the teacher to help bring out the leader in the student. It's being trusting. And many times in districts, we have such pressure, so many demands, that our leadership style could be described by those that we're leading as kind of command and control. Maybe it's an enlightened command and control and a trustworthy and a kind and a caring and benevolent command and control, but they might feel that we're not truly trusting them. Be trusting and as well as trustworthy, and you will unleash and ignite the capabilities, the talents, the ingenuity, the potential, not only of our students, but of our teachers, of our fellow administrators, of our peers, of our colleagues, of each other. And we'll build this kind of high trust culture. I like to put it this way. You could have two trustworthy people working together, both trustworthy, and yet no trust between them, even though they're both trustworthy, if neither person is willing to extend trust to the other. So we need to be trusting. That's the biggest gap I find as I go back and work with clients time and again, is not on the trustworthiness sides, it's on the trusting side. That's my charge. Let's all say, how can I lead out in extending more trust to others and to becoming known for being a trusting leader as maybe the highest demonstration and value of my leadership?
That's great. So if I'm a leader listening right now, and I know that this is just resonating and I've got to figure this out, I want to dive into trust, where's the best place that I can go to dive into more of the content of what you're talking about?
Yeah. Well, I write heavily about this in my book, The Speed of Trust. And we've applied this speed of trust with all kinds of schools and districts to help build a high trust team and a high trust culture. I'm working with a district right now where, they've gone through the pandemic like everyone, and people are exhausted. They're burnt out. Teachers are, and administrators too. And they feel sometimes beat up, and they're trying to build that emotional resilience. And they're trying to build the trust that sometimes has been maybe lost a little bit in this process. at various levels. Maybe they've lost trust with different stakeholders, maybe with parents, maybe in the community, maybe with teachers, maybe with fellow administrators, maybe within the district at large. And so we're showing that what the Speed of Trust does is it gives people a methodology, a framework, so they can think about trust, a language so they can talk about trust, and a process so they can build it intentionally through their behavior. So I don't mean to be advocating for my own work, other than to say the strength of it is it shows people how you can build trust on purpose through your credibility, through your behavior, from the inside out. Meaning we start with ourselves, we look in the mirror, change starts here, trust starts here, starts with me, through my credibility, through my behavior, and I ripple out at every level. And so depending upon my role, I can model this and ripple out from every level around credibility, around behavior, and understanding those 13 behaviors is so helpful. But if you don't go to the book and the like, then I would just say this: focus on starting by becoming not only trustworthy, but trusting, and really challenge yourself on this and say, how can I maybe find the appropriate ways to extend more trust to my leaders, extend more trust to my teachers, and have them, how would they describe, do they feel I'm a trusting leader? Or would they deep down say, a little bit controlling, a little bit command and control, a little bit, benevolent, but maybe a little bit, containing instead of unleashing me. And we want to unleash our people, our teams, our culture. We want to build this kind of culture. So that would be the best place to start. Look in the mirror, focus on your credibility, focus on your behavior, and focus on trusting. And as you do that, you'll inspire people. And I like to say that inspiring others is also a learnable skill, just like trusting is a learnable skill. And you inspire when you model, you inspire when you trust others, and you inspire when you connect with people through caring and belonging, and when you connect people to purpose, to meaning and contribution. And the great thing about education is the purpose, meaning, and contribution in education is greater than any industry out there, because we're focusing on our youth, students, and the future, and helping them achieve their best version of themselves and become the kind of person and leader that they can become. How can you have a greater purpose, a more inspiring purpose than that? So, we just want to unleash that. And we'll do that when our people and our teachers and our leaders feel like we are modeling, we are trusting, and we are connecting with them by showing that we care about them and showing that they belong, and by connecting them to the purpose, the meaning, and contribution in their work. And when people feel inspired, they'll inspire others. And so that's the opportunity. So those are some of the things to get started. It comes back to looking in the mirror, trusting ourselves, and leading out and extending trust to others.
That's great. Well, this message, first off, thanks for making time for us, because I know you're incredibly busy.
Absolutely.
Also, thanks for sharing your heart with us. As you know, most educators are winding down their school year, or they're already out, and there's at some point, either now or in the coming weeks, going to transition to building their culture for next year. And so your message comes at the right time for so many of us. And I appreciate you just bringing your full self, as you always do. Anybody who has not had the experience to be in your presence before, this is how you are always when you're sharing your heart. And so I hope people know that this is not about the bright lights in front of you. This is just who you are, and it's incredibly refreshing. So thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
You are welcome, Dustin. Thanks for giving me this opportunity. I love, honor, admire, respect teachers. My daughter's a teacher, and teachers, and also the leaders and the administrators of teachers within districts, within schools, because of the work that you do. So that question of who are you and what do you love about what you do? Anyone in education, any leader in education is on third base because of what you do. It is so meaningful, and I honor you as leaders, as administrators, and as really as leaders. Because again, trusting turns an administrator into a leader, and you are leaders of students, leaders of teachers, leaders of leaders, and so it is exciting what you do. So thank you for who you are and what you do to all the leaders that we're doing this podcast for. I honor you.
I appreciate it so much. Hopefully we'll have you on again soon. Okay.
Thank you.
Have a great day. Thank you. Please support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel, podcast on Apple or Spotify, and help us celebrate the beautiful, messy work of shaping human potential.